July 2002, over Germany, the middle of the night.
What is it?
A Russian plane is taking children on holiday to Spain, but the pilots can't believe what they see heading towards them.
Get on the left!
Increase climb.
Climb, he said!
June 2002, the city of Ufa in western Russia. Ufa is populated by both Christians and Muslims. This year, its most outstanding teenagers have been chosen to go on a 2-week vacation organized by UNESCO near Barcelona in Spain. They are among the most clever, athletic or artistic children of Ufa. Kirill Diktaryov is a 14-year-old prodigy. He's been painting since he was 4 years old and has already had 2 public exhibitions. Alina Hananova is a 12-year-old who's won several gymnastics competitions. The 46 children from Ufa, accompanied by a few teachers, leave on a train to Moscow. There, they're due to catch their flight to Barcelona. But in Moscow, things start to go wrong. The tourist agency accidentally takes the children to the wrong airport, so they miss their plane. They're terribly disappointed. While the agency tries to sort out the mess, the children go sightseeing in the Russian capital. It takes 2 days to charter another jet, but finally they're on their way to Barcelona. On July the 1st, 2002, the children from Ufa board their plane at a Moscow airport. The Kaloyevs are not part of the school group. They're going on a holiday to meet their father, who's an architect, and is finishing a project near Barcelona. No fewer than 5 Russians are flying this plane. The captain is Alexander Gross, who's been a pilot for over 30 years.
Alexander had a good theoretical knowledge. He was very smart.
Today, the first officer is Oleg Grigoriev. But actually, Grigoriev is the airline's chief pilot. On this trip, he'll be evaluating Captain Gross's flying.
If you did something wrong, some captains would criticize you very rudely. Others would be very formal and polite. But Oleg Grigoriev would express his disapproval in a gesture, like that, meaning, why on earth did you do that?
Captain Gross is in command, but Captain Grigoriev is his supervisor. If it comes to the crunch, who will really be in charge? Seated in the left rear is Murat Itkilov, normally the first officer, but who's not officially on duty because Grigoriev is in his seat. Nevertheless, since he'll soon be promoted to captain, his opinions are considered.
Murat был профессионален как пилот. Любил летать.
Murat was a very professional pilot. He loved to fly. Murat was interested in the new stuff in aviation and always kept up to date on the most progressive things brought in.
Also on the flight deck are an experienced navigator and a flight engineer. Just before 11 that evening, Bashkirian Airlines Flight 2937 leaves Moscow. The plane is a Tupolev 154. Like most modern aircraft, it carries collision avoidance equipment called TCAS, or Traffic Collision Avoidance System.
Descend, descend, descend.
TCAS works because all commercial aircraft carry a transponder, which sends a constant stream of radio signals identifying them and saying where they are. TCAS listens in and calculates whether any of the planes is on a collision course. If they are, it will tell the pilot what action to take to avoid collision.
Descend.
If air traffic control should ever let them down, TCAS will be their last line of defense.
Clear of conflict.
Hundreds of miles away in Bergamo, Italy, a Boeing 757 is getting underway. It's flying for DHL, the international freight company, and is heading for their European base at Brussels in Belgium. The Russian Tupolev will cross its path over southern Germany. The Boeing has only 2 people aboard, Captain Paul Phillips, who's British, and First Officer Brant Campioni, who's Canadian, and due to fly the next leg of the journey. The DHL takes off at 6 minutes past 11 on what will be its last journey. Ten to 8 at the Skyguide Area Control Center in Zurich, Switzerland. The busy day shift has ended and the night shift is reporting for work. Peter Nielsen is an experienced controller. He's been doing this job for 8 years. The center regulates air traffic in southern Germany as well as northern Switzerland. Tonight, there are only 2 controllers on duty. But the traffic in their sector is light, and Nielsen's colleague decides to take a lengthy break, a common practice at Skyguide. Peter Nielsen is now responsible for all air traffic on 2 radar screens, which sit several feet apart. At 10 past 11, 2 technicians arrive. They inform Peter that Skyguide management has authorized them to carry out maintenance work on the main radar. While they do so, the screens will work much more slowly and will give no visual 2-minute warning if planes are getting too close to each other.
Thai Inter 933, route traffic in Allgäu. Bavarian 350, descend flight level 270.
The engineers now tell Peter Nielsen they have to shut down the telephone system as well. They switch over to the standby phones. No one realizes it yet, but the seeds of disaster have been sown. The Russian plane, filled with schoolchildren, is now over central Germany and flying towards Switzerland. Captain Grigoriev gets final clearance from the last German control center before they cross south into Switzerland.
128.05, Bravo Tango Charlie 2937. Goodbye.
The German controller hands over the Russian plane to Skyguide, where Peter Nielsen is at the helm. Meanwhile, the DHL plane is climbing north over the Alps and is now entering Swiss airspace.
Zurich, radar, good evening. Dilmun 611, I'm climbing flight level 260, direct Obasi.
Captain Paul Phillips of the DHL requests clearance to climb to a higher altitude. The thinner air there will mean less air resistance and save fuel.
Roger, climb flight level 320. Direct Tango Golf Oscar and requesting 360, thanks, it's available.
Tillman 611, climb flight level 360.
The DHL reaches flight level 360, or 36,000 feet, the same altitude as the Russian plane. And they're on a collision course, but they're many miles apart. So far, no danger. Now the assistant gives Peter Nielsen a new flight strip. An Airbus Aero Lloyd Flight 1135 is flying to the airport of Friedrichshafen nearby. It's going to increase Peter's workload dramatically over the next 5 minutes and have him switching from one screen to another. Peter tries to dial the airport control tower at Friedrichshafen to discuss handing over the Aero Lloyd flight to them. But the line is dead. He tries a second time.
Die gewünschte Verbindung ist nicht möglich. Bitte überprüfen Sie.
The phones aren't working. The Aero Lloyd pilot is trying to make contact with Peter. He has to leave the Russian pilots unattended. But the Russian pilot is also calling him on the other screen.
Aero Lloyd 1135, roger. Call you back. Station calling.
Say again, please.
Zurich, good evening. Bravo Tango Charlie, 2937.
Level 360.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937, squad 7520.
The Aero Lloyd is calling again.
Yeah, expect so. Call you back shortly.
Now another plane needs him. A Thai Airways flight heading north.
Thai into 933. Contact now on Munich 132.140. Goodbye.
140 Thai.
Air traffic controllers are used to handling tricky situations. But tonight, Peter's equipment isn't working properly, and he's controlling two screens at the same time. Normally, his radar would warn of any impending collision. What he doesn't know is that tonight, it's out of action.
Correct. What is your present heading?
Present heading is 265.
Roger. Right turn, heading 280, vector ILS 24.
Right heading 280 to expect ILS 24, Aero Lloyd 1.
Peter wants to get this Aero Lloyd flight off his hands. He tries dialing the public number for the Friedrichshafen control tower for the third time.
Bitte überprüfen Sie die Rufnummer. Die gewünschte Verbindung ist...
Meanwhile, the Russian airliner and the DHL plane are still heading towards each other at a closing speed of over 800 miles per hour. Neither crew is aware that they're only 2.5 minutes apart. The DHL plane is now approaching the Swiss border with Germany. The Russian Tupolev is heading for exactly the same spot and at the same altitude. Finally, someone at another air traffic control center in Germany spots the danger.
Conflict.
He grabs the phone to warn Nielsen, but can't get through. International air traffic rules prevent him from talking to the pilots directly.
Look at that.
Now, for the first time, the Russian pilots can see the DHL plane on the screen of their TCAS anti-collision computer. But Peter Nielsen is still focused on getting the Aero Lloyd flight safely down.
Aero Lloyd 1135.
Aero Lloyd 1135, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I lost my connection to Friedrichshafen Airport. Could you please call them on your second set, 124.35. Tell them you're coming in ILS 24 with 20 miles now?
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Okay, taking over.
On the DHL cargo plane, the crew is relaxed. They don't know they're on a collision course. Their TCAS hasn't sounded a warning yet.
Stuff I can get you?
The first officer goes to the washroom. On the Russian plane, the pilots are getting concerned. The other plane is getting closer and closer, but they're not exactly sure whether he's on the same altitude as them.
He's going below us.
Why below?
500. No, 100 meters.
Traffic.
Now fucking traffic.
Why?
Traffic.
TCAS, the collision avoidance computer, is warning the Russian pilots that the other plane is getting too close for comfort. At the same moment, the TCAS in the DHL cockpit detects the Russian plane.
Descend.
Peter Nielsen finally realizes what's happening.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937, descend flight level 350.
Expedite. I have crossing traffic.
Descend.
Captain Gross disengages the autopilot and starts to descend.
Climb. Climb.
TCAS is telling them to climb. The controller is telling them to descend.
It says climb.
He is guiding us down.
Bravo
Descend
Tango
Charlie 2937, descend level 350, expedite descent.
Expedite descent level 350.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937.
Peter Nielsen thinks he's averted a collision by telling the Russian plane to descend. But what he doesn't know is that the DHL pilots have received a TCAS instruction telling them to descend.
Increase! Dilmoon 600, TCAS descent!
They're trying to tell Nielsen that they have a TCAS instruction to descend, but Peter can't hear them. If both planes obeyed TCAS, there'd be no problem. But the Russians, instead of climbing, have followed the controller's orders. Now both planes are diving towards each other.
He's going below us!
Fuck, what is it?
Get on the left!
Increase climb. Increase climb.
Climb, it says!
Climb! Descend! Fuck, descend hard! Climb!
The tail of the DHL clips the belly of the Tupolev, tearing it apart. The pilots soon lose consciousness. The DHL struggles on for another 2 minutes. It will crash 4 miles away.
Can we go over to 337?
Affirm. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Peter is unaware of what just happened.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937. Bravo Tango Charlie 2937. Bravo Tango Charlie.
This is the nightmare that every controller hopes will not happen to him. 2 of his aircraft colliding, killing scores of people.
Oh!
Peter Nielsen leaves the control room for the last time, but his story is far from over. The wreckage of the 2 planes has fallen just outside the small city of Überlingen on the German-Swiss border. Wreckage is scattered over 130 square miles. It's the worst mid-air collision in German post-war history. Debris comes raining down around a school for handicapped children run by Bruno and Stella Wegmüller.
The sky was orange, red, flaming, and we saw these pieces falling down and detonations again and again, and we realized it couldn't have been a normal thunderstorm. It was something we had never heard and seen before.
It was incredible because there are many, many houses here, and there was nothing on this place. But around our school, we find the bodies, children.
We very soon also realized that we couldn't do anything, really. We couldn't save anyone, we couldn't help anyone.
The problem was that the bodies and debris were dispersed over a very, very wide area, approximately 40 square kilometers. A corridor 20 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide.
It was the largest police operation in the province of Baden-Württemberg, lasting a week and involving over 6,000 people searching for the bodies.
The people were all very sad. They were all in a state of extreme shock, and naturally the rescue team could feel that and empathized with their suffering.
The policeman is standing where the DHL crashed.
Here you see no more trees. The trees have completely burned down. We assume that the turbines of the Boeing separated first, approximately 700 to 800 meters high before this plane crashed. One landed 300 meters that way, and the other turbine was another 500 meters that way.
In this garden lay many of the bodies of the children of Ufa.
In this part died 28 children. In this field there was a child. More over here in this field there was a
Vitaly Khaloyev, the Russian architect, was awaiting his family in Barcelona. He's one of the first to arrive in Überlingen. Although the relatives are not encouraged to participate in the search, Vitaly cannot help himself. Vitaly finds a broken pearl necklace. He recognizes it as his 4-year-old daughter's. Amazingly, amidst all the carnage, Vitaly finds his daughter's body intact.
She did not suffer at all.
The mutilated bodies of his wife and son won't be found until later. Over 6 days of searching, the rescue workers gather bodies and body parts scattered all over the southern German countryside.
By Thursday of that week, 2 days later, the relatives started arriving. They could not all see the bodies we'd found because most of the bodies were badly charred or mutilated. We didn't permit the relatives to view the bodies in that condition.
In Ufa, in western Russia, both Christian and Muslim communities are devastated by the loss of their children. In the cemetery, where 53 of the people in the Tupolev are buried, there are 2 double rows of gravestones, with the Christian Orthodox on one side and the Muslims on the other. It's eerily reminiscent of the seating arrangement on the plane. The monument evokes a flight of paper planes frozen in flight. Vitaly Khaloyev, who lost his entire family, has designed and built a huge monument in their memory. Day and night he lingers at the cemetery, inconsolable. At Skyguide in Zurich, after the collision, work has all but come to a standstill.
They were shocked, they were helpless, there was a lot of sadness, people crying, and we were criticized for being too technocratic after the accident. I have to accept that. One of the biggest tasks was to maintain operations, because there were planes coming in, going out after this tragedy, and that was a very, very difficult situation for everybody.
For the next 3 weeks at the Zurich Air Traffic Control Center, capacity is reduced for lack of available controllers. Peter Nielsen never again worked on an air traffic workstation. The hunt begins for a scapegoat. If two planes collide in empty skies, someone must be to blame. At first, some suspect the Russians.
The pilot of the Russian plane is said to have ignored repeated instructions from air traffic controllers. And while the
repeatedly, they contacted the Russian pilot and asked him to change altitude because he was flying at a level where he should not have been. Now, the Russian pilot never responded to those warnings from air traffic control.
The Russian pilots, particularly in Soviet times and also now, but to a lesser extent, were extremely well trained. I have no concerns about the training of pilots. They've been trained for almost every operational possibility that could happen.
Why did the TCAS device meant to avoid collisions, in this case maybe help cause one? And why didn't the Russian plane descend when first ordered? A language problem? Controller commands are always in English.
I knew everybody from that crew. Everybody knew English enough to speak with controller.
So who is to blame? The media spotlight now falls on controller Peter Nielsen. He was the man who'd guided the two planes towards each other. They were under his control. He must have caused them to collide.
I was as shocked as I could have been with any other name or any other colleague. I was just very sorry for him. The media coverage about the incident very often makes you angry because these statements are taken out of context. You really get the impression they just want to fill the newspaper, they write whatever they get. They go after colleagues, they give them a call at home, they follow you wherever you are.
You don't deserve to be the boogeyman for everybody. And that's something which really is still very difficult to accept, that suddenly we are some sort having to take the blame because the others are dead or the others are hiding behind politics, rules and things like this.
We started to leave this building by the underground exit, which leads through another building, just not to see anybody. They were asking people on the street in Kloten, people who were not involved at all, just to broadcast something in the evening. And that makes you angry, and you cannot resist it.
And what more do we know about this Swiss controller at the center of the investigation?
He was chased by the media. He was accused of being a murderer.
He's the man, obviously, everyone wants to talk to, but at the moment the Swiss say he's in no position to talk. And we heard today that the Swiss authorities have opened an investigation to see whether there's enough evidence for charges of manslaughter.
The accusation was manslaughter by negligence in 71 cases. And the speciality is that in this case the investigating judge has been working on a investigation on his own, independently from what the Aviation Investigation Board of Germany did.
Meanwhile, that investigation is underway, headed by Germany's air crash detectives, the BFU. By the fifth day, they've read all the black boxes.
So this is a typical voice recorder, which was built into the Tupolev 154. It shows two reels. The recording time of this recorder is 30 minutes. And this is rather solid, but the original voice recorder of the Tupolev was heavily damaged. So we had to remove the tape and replay it on such a specialized tape recorder.
This is the hangar where wreckage of the planes was examined.
This one here is the lower surface of the right wing of the Tupolev, and that remaining stub here went below the Tupolev and caused these scratches. That top part of the vertical tail remained at the accident site on the main wreckage of the Boeing.
But could this accident have been avoided? TCAS normally has a safeguard mechanism called a reversal. If an alert is issued and one aircraft crew ignores an instruction, TCAS orders a reversal. If the TCAS on aircraft A senses that aircraft B is still on a collision course, it will tell it to go in another direction. But it didn't. Why?
One of the major requirements for that is that both planes have to be at least 100 feet apart in altitude. But this requirement was not met at the time. That's why no reversal was given.
When the DHL's TCAS saw that the Tupolev wasn't climbing, it could only tell its pilots to descend even faster.
Increase descent.
July 2003. Many parents returned to Überlingen in Germany for the first anniversary. The Germans built a memorial on the site of the tragedy. It's made up of a series of giant silver pearls on a broken necklace. The head of Skyguide is among the crowd.
Can you tell us, what are the mistakes you made?
I don't think this is the time to talk about it. I'm sure you'll understand.
Have you apologized?
Okay. Thank you.
Among the parents is Vitaly Kaloyev. He asks the head of Skyguide which controller was responsible for the accident, but receives no answer.
Yes, in fact, the man asked if it is possible to meet the controller, to meet Peter, and the answer was it is not possible.
The request passes almost unnoticed, but Vitaly Kaloyev is not satisfied.
Descend. Crossing.
Meanwhile, as the investigators work, they discover a fog of confusion surrounding TCAS. When it was introduced 20 years previously, there'd been a fatal omission.
Descend flight level 350. Expedite. I have...
No one said what should happen if there was a conflict between what TCAS was saying and what the controller was saying.
It says climb.
There's no hard and fast rule to guide the pilots.
He is guiding us down.
Increase descent.
Whilst pilots in the West have always been taught to obey TCAS,
600 TCAS descent.
in the rest of the world, it's anyone's guess.
We're not accustomed to not trusting controllers. In civil aviation, there were lots of situations when pilots didn't follow instructions of the controller, and that led to plane crashes or other accidents.
The mentality of Russians is still very much in the lines of the old Soviet ways, and they're much more inclined to follow instructions than to do what they think may be appropriate. They always reckon that the other guy knows better.
The potential for a terrible accident was there, and a year and a half before the Überlingen tragedy, it nearly happened. Over Japan, 2 jumbo jets with 677 people aboard came so close that they filled each other's windscreens. The violent avoidance maneuver caused 100 people to be injured, some of them seriously. This was seconds away from being the worst plane crash in aviation history. Once again, a pilot had listened to the controller instead of his TCAS. It should have served as a warning to everyone. Yet from ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, there was only silence. ICAO is responsible for drawing up the rules of commercial aviation. German investigators say that their vagueness about how to use TCAS was one of the reasons for the Überlingen disaster.
I think this is the first time that I remember any major accident investigation, the one done by the BFU, fingering any of the aviation authorities in any serious way. And this is a serious way. So I think this is quite unique.
If ICAO had carried out a detailed investigation of the incident in Japan and made recommendations that led to changes in procedures, this probably would not have happened.
ICAO did not feel it necessary to get involved in this, and they left it entirely up to the Japanese authorities. Had it been a collision, maybe they would have got involved.
After this near miss, the Japanese government immediately asked for their guidance. But unfortunately, ICAO only acted on the request 18 months later, after the Überlingen disaster.
Perhaps the ICAO procedures and standards, but in particular operating procedures for airborne collision avoidance, were somewhat ambiguous or open to interpretation.
The Japanese incident was not the only warning ICAO received. In the 2 years leading up to the Überlingen collision, 4 other near misses happened in Europe alone because one set of pilots obeyed air traffic control instead of their TCAS.
If I have to summarize the advice that we gave the world, if a warning comes from ACAS, pilots should immediately follow it at all times. With the benefit of hindsight, you always ask yourself, could we have done more? And an accident is a wake-up call for everybody.
All of these regrets are of little comfort now to the grieving parents of Ufa.
Everything that was good is in the past and was connected with my child. All the hopes, dreams were connected with him, with his future. And now, nothing left. At least I've got nothing left. Our pain doesn't go away, you know. It's getting stronger every year. Some grown-up people made a mistake, made a fatal mistake, and the kids were gone. This is Kirill's room. Everything in this room is like it was when he was alive. Nothing's changed. After he was killed, there were also 2 exhibitions. One exhibition took place here, in Ufa, while the other one was in Germany, in Überlingen.
Vitaly Khaloyev, the Russian architect, has lost his entire family, everything. He himself has gone to pieces. He's become obsessed with finding out who is responsible for the collision. Khaloyev decides to travel to Zurich to play out the last tragic chapter in the Überlingen story. On February the 24th, 2004, a stranger calls at the house of the controller, Peter Nielsen.
Get out of the way. Just go away.
It was just the saddest thing you can imagine. I knew his family. I knew how much he loved his kids and his wife, and
The presumed perpetrator is apparently 48 years old and of Eastern origin. He is likely the father of one of the families that was killed at the crash. He likely lost his wife and both their children.
They found Vitaly Khaloyev nearby in a hotel. Suspected but not yet charged with the murder, he's presently in a psychiatric clinic while they decide whether he's fit to stand trial.
We didn't want him to be killed. We didn't want to have more victims related to that catastrophe because of our children.
The killing of the flight controller was a very, very sad event. And the saddest thing of all was that he was not actually responsible for the accident. The system responsible for the accident was the poor Skyguide management and quality control of their system.
The investigators had worked out exactly what went wrong that night at Skyguide, and how an unfortunate series of events had made disaster almost inevitable. First, Peter's colleague goes for a break, leaving him alone to watch two radar screens several feet apart.
It was a standard practice at the ATC company that at night, one air traffic controller was responsible for controlling the entire airspace of ATC Zurich.
Then, following management instructions, the maintenance men start to switch things off. Peter's radar screen is working more slowly and will not warn him if two planes are about to collide. He doesn't know that.
During the maintenance work, the radar system had to be run in fallback mode. In fallback mode, the controller has no STCA available.
STCA is short-term collision alert, a warning on the radar screen that planes are in imminent danger of collision.
He did not know that the STCA system would not be available.
Then by chance, an unexpected aircraft, the Aeroloid tourist plane, arrives at the critical moment and needs a lot of attention. It completely distracts Peter. He tries to get outside help, but the main phone system has been accidentally disconnected by the maintenance crew, and the backup phone isn't working. The controller has been robbed of all the technical support he needs.
The phone link with Friedrichshafen was down. At this time, there were various radio transmissions, and the controller had to answer them on the different frequencies.
Finally, when both planes are descending, the DHL pilots cannot tell him what's happening because the radio frequency is busy.
600, TCAS, descent!
The earliest they could do that was 23 seconds later, because until then, the frequency was blocked by the ATC Zurich transmission to the Tupolev crew.
May 2004. It had taken the German BFU investigators 22 months to publish their final report. They found that the disaster had two major causes. Firstly, Peter Nielsen was too late in noticing the danger of a collision. Secondly, the Russian crew was wrong to obey him when he told them to descend, rather than their own TCAS equipment telling them to climb. But other pilots understand their dilemma.
The TCAS commands are spoken in such a dispassionate voice. Descend. Increase descent. Such a matter-of-fact type of voice. And then there's the voice of the air traffic controller's urgent command. Descend immediately. Leave this altitude immediately. Go to another altitude at once. So, whichever voice sounded more urgent was the one the crew obeyed.
Finally, the report severely criticized Skyguide for leaving a lone controller on duty that night.
We have learned our lesson, and we don't have single-manned operations or only one controller in front of a monitor anymore.
This might happen again. Another badly organized air control service or a crew might make a mistake.
You're guilty or not guilty. That's not the meaning of a final report. The meaning of a final report is facts. What has happened? Why did it happen? What are the lessons to be learned? Safety requirements.
Mistakes were made by us also, and we regret them deeply. We acknowledge our responsibility as set out in the BFU report, and we ask the families of the victims for forgiveness.
At Skyguide in Zurich, a rose now sits in a vase in memory of Peter Nielsen and the tragedy of Überlingen. In the cabin, the flight attendants and passengers have no idea that their plane is dangerously low on fuel.
Then the go-around procedure is stating that the power be applied slowly.
In the cockpit, the crew now hastily discuss the go-around procedure. what the manual says they must do if they can't find the runway through the fog and low clouds and have to go around a second time. It's standard procedure.
Power be applied slowly and to avoid rapid accelerations and to have a minimum of nose-up attitude.
To maintain what?
Minimum nose-up attitude. That means...
Flight engineer Moyano is concerned that if the captain were to pull up the plane's nose too sharply, all the remaining fuel would slosh to the back of the tank, causing engines to stop.
Covered on fuel during the go-around. What it means is it doesn't contain fuel for feeding itself and a flameout could occur. And it is necessary to lower the nose again.
Right now we are proceeding to the airport inbound. We have 17 miles.
Roger.
This means we'll have hamburger tonight.
Avianca, descend and maintain 3,000.
Descend and maintain 3,000. Avianca 052 Heavy.
3,000 feet. They got us. They're already vectoring us.
No, they are descending us.
And they are giving us priority.
Avianca 052 Heavy. Contact Kennedy Tower 119.1. Good day.
Only minutes before landing, Flight 52 is handed off to a JFK tower controller whose shift is about to end.
Avianca 052 Heavy, Kennedy Tower 22 left. You are number 3 following 727 traffic on a 9-mile final.
Avianca 052
Heavy, roger.
Can I lower the landing gear yet?
No, I think it's too early. If we lower the landing gear, we have to maintain a very high nose attitude.
So desperately low is their fuel that the first officer wants to delay putting down the landing gear, which will increase the aircraft's drag, requiring more power and using more of what little fuel they have remaining.
I was so happy. For me, it was like a joy. I mean, we're going to land soon and this is going to be end.
Avianca 052, what is your airspeed?
Avianca 052, 140 knots.
Avianca 052, can you increase your airspeed 10 knots?
10?
Okay, 10 knots, increasing.
Increase.
10 knots more.
Tell me things louder because I'm not hearing it. Lower the gear.
Gear down.
Avianca 05222 left, wind 190 at 20, cleared to land.
Clear to land, Avianca 052 Heavy. Wind check, please.
190 at 20.
With the weather deteriorating and flying on fumes, the crew of Flight 52 will have only one chance of getting their 149 passengers safely on the ground.
Avianca 052, say airspeed.
145 knots.
Are we cleared to land now?
Yes, sir, we are clear to land.
Stand by. Flaps 50. Landing checklist complete.
It was extremely important that Avianca 52 landed on their first approach JFK. The voice recorder revealed that the captain was certainly quite concerned about the fuel state, and he was talking aggressively with the first officer, putting out flaps, getting the airplane configured.
It was time for the flight engineer to say, this is the only approach we're going to be able to make, and he didn't.
Give me 50.
Flaps 50 now.
All set for landing.
Standing by for lights. Slightly below glide slope. 1,000 feet above field. Instruments cross-checked, slightly below.
Stand by for lights.
Stand by.
The wind is slightly from the left, 190 to 20. Below glide slope.
With about 10 minutes of fuel remaining, and nearly 4 kilometers from the runway, Flight 52 finds itself flying into violent wind shear, forcing them to slow the plane down.
They were getting like 60 knots of wind on the nose, and then as they descended on down through about 500 feet to the ground, they were down to 20 knots. So that's 40 knot change and 1,000 feet of elevation. That's a lot.
This is the wind shear.
Now the wind changes direction. It's pressing them down towards the ground.
Glide slope!
Glide slope. It's in grade 500 feet. Glide slope.
The captain desperately searches for the runway, but it's shrouded in low clouds and fog.
Terrain.
Lights!
The runway, where is it?
I don't see it. I don't see it.
The plane's warning system is telling them that they're about to crash.
It's in grade 500 feet.
just 4 kilometers from touchdown, Flight 52 has been caught in violent wind shear. To save the plane, Captain Caviedes applies full throttle, burning up more of the plane's precious fuel.
Give me the landing gear up! Landing gear up!
The airplane was about 200 feet above the ground, about 2 miles from the runway, which was well below the glide slope and very dangerous. So the airplane almost crashed on its first approach.
When you get a missed approach, now it changes the whole ball game.
Request another traffic pattern.
Executing a missed approach. Avianca 052 Heavy.
The operation of pulling the plane up in the missed approach was a very violent one.
I don't know what happened with the runway. I didn't see it.
I didn't see it either.
I didn't see it.
Avianca 052, you were
Making a left turn, correct, sir?
Tell him we are in emergency.
2,000 feet. That's right, to 180 on
the heading, and we'll try once again. We are running out of fuel.
Okay.
What did he say?
I already advised him that we are going to attempt again.
Advise him we are in an emergency. Do you tell him?
Yes, sir, I already advised him.
But the tower controller, at the end of his shift, transfers Avianca 52 to his counterpart in approach control. They'll have to begin all over again.
Contact approach on 118.4.
Approach, Avianca 052 Heavy. We just missed a missed approach and we are maintaining 2,000.
Flaps 14.
Avianca 052 Heavy, New York.
Good evening. Climb and maintain 3,000.
Advise him we don't have fuel.
Climb and maintain 3,000. We are running out of fuel, sir.
Okay, fly heading 080.
Did you already advise him we don't have fuel?
Yes, sir, I already advised him. We are going to maintain 3,000 and he's going to get us back.
As they get back in the pattern and circle the field and come back in again. That again adds to the traffic jam that was being created at Kennedy Airport.
Avianca 052 Heavy,
I'm going to turn you about 15 miles northeast and then bring you back onto the approach. Is that okay with you and your fuel?
What did he say?
The guy is angry.
I guess so. Thank you very much.
These guys were out, and they didn't say we were out. And he allowed the approach control to vector him way out in the original pattern and 15 miles north of the outer marker again.
Flight 52 is instructed to fly a long approach pattern for another landing attempt. The plane is down to its last dregs of fuel as the crew waits for final clearance from ground controllers.
And then they were run way out towards Long Island and vectored all around, which was equivalent to holding for another 15-20 minutes.
Did you get clearance yet?
Can you give us a final yet? Avianca 052 Heavy.
Avianca 052.
Affirmative, sir. Turn left, heading 040. Climb and maintain 3,000.
Negative, sir. We are running out of fuel.
Okay, turn left, heading 310, sir.
Set flaps 14.
Okay, and you're number 2 for the
Approach. I just have to give you enough room so you can make it without
having to come out again.
Okay. We're number 2 and flying 360 now.
Avianca 052 Heavy, turn left, heading 330.
The lights in the aircraft start to flicker, a sign that the engines are being starved of fuel.
330 on the heading, Avianca 052.
Once there's no fuel flowing through the pump out of the tank, an amber light comes on to tell you that tank is empty.
Flame out! Flame out on engine number 4!
Flame out on it!
Flame out on engine number 3!
Coming the runway.
The passengers can hear the sound of the engines beginning to shut down.
When the engines went off, I looked over to the lady that was sitting next to me, and I asked her to give me her hand. And I philosophically accepted, I might die here. This is it.
Avianca 052, we just lost 2 engines and we need priority, please.
Avianca 052.
Turn left, heading 250. Intercept the localizer.
250, roger.
Select the ILS.
ILS.
Avianca 052, you're 15 miles from the outer marker. Maintain 2,000 until established in the localizer. Cleared for ILS 22 left.
Roger, Avianca.
Did you select the ILS?
It's ready on 2.
When all the engines flame out and the generators fall off the line, a considerable amount of power is lost, electrical power is lost.
In the cabin, the screams, the crying, and then this terrible sound of the wind against the fuselage as the plane drops from the sky.
Avianca 052, radar contact lost.
Avianca's missing due to the weather thing.
Yeah, Avianca 52 lost an engine.
We're trying to find out why.
Yeah, we're no longer talking to Avianca. He's 15 northeast of Kennedy.
Ah, wonderful.
At Clipper 18, turn left heading 180.
6.5 hours after leaving Colombia, Avianca Flight 52 is missing somewhere over New York.
Yes, hello. I live in Cove Neck in Oyster Bay, and there is a plane crashed in our yard in front of our house.
When I woke up, the first thing that I did, I put my hand over here in my back, and I was bleeding. I said, "Oh my God, we crashed."
Both my legs were broken, and I had, blood all over the place.
El asiento en el que estaba sentada la hija mía, sí recuerdo que
The
estaba
seat where my daughter was sitting was totally destroyed by pieces of steel that happened to have come from the wing.
pedazos de hierro que entraron del ala y lo
I found my baby Daniela amongst the pieces of a torn-up, twisted chair. And I picked her up like this, and she was drenched in blood.
Bañada en sangre.
Avianca Flight 52 has crashed on Long Island, New York, less than 28 kilometers from JFK Airport. From deep in the woods, medical technician Bob O'Brien can hear the survivors before he can see the shattered 707.
What I first heard was it were just some people who were crying in pain, but it was apparent immediately what had happened when the plane hit the mountain and just stopped dead.
It just fell out of the sky. That's how witnesses describe the crash of Avianca Flight 52. A strangely silent crash.
There's not a big fire here. That will make it easier for investigators to examine if there were any gas or engine problems.
There have been reports of lightning in the area just before the plane went down.
The spokesman for the controllers union says that Kennedy is critically understaffed, a problem that is compounded by bad weather.
Rescuers have not yet given up on finding more victims.
Lo primero que me acuerdo es que yo miro y
First thing I remember is that I looked up and I saw a priest. He was praying for me and I was lying down on the ground. Right above us, I saw 3 or 4 helicopters flying over us.
3 o 4 helicópteros volando encima mío.
I managed to get up on top of the fuselage, and there's that door handle that says, in case of emergency, pull here. So I pulled that door handle, and that door handle just went, and the door came open about 4 inches. And then I was able to flip that over, and I could just see piles and piles of people strapped in their seats.
The extreme G-force of the crash has broken off the cockpit and catapulted it through a stand of trees and into the deck of a home some 30 meters from the impact site.
Come on, somebody get the back here.
And I saw some cables, and I saw a big hole in the fuselage over the passengers that were sitting next to me who were kind of unconscious.
And on top of me was this guy who was bleeding, a big guy, I don't know who he was, but he was on top of me, but I was sitting.
I pulled myself with those cables towards that hole, which was over the wing.
I started screaming, "Hey, help me out, help me, take me out of here." And then somebody, when they realized that I was alive, they removed they took away the guy who was on top of me, and they took me out of the airplane.
At that moment, a fireman was climbing on the wing, and he saw me, and he said, "There's a guy here," and he pulled me out.
37 fire and rescue companies from Nassau County are quickly mobilized. The rescue is the largest pre-9/11 operation of its kind in the New York area.
That little girl was sitting up on the fuselage and she was crying, mi madre, mi madre. And that imprint of horror just was, you know, you just in your mind's eye focus right back in on, I saw mi madre, I saw her mother, and I know what that little girl was seeing. It was horrible enough for me, and I'm a professional rescuer.
I realized that my baby was dying, so I began to scream.
Please help me. I had the baby here, please.
The plane has crashed in the wealthy neighborhood of Cove Neck, near the home of the father of tennis star John McEnroe. Medics set up a makeshift triage unit on his lawn. When daylight breaks 10 hours later, 85 survivors have been pulled from the wreck. The lead flight attendant is the only member of crew to survive the crash. Of the 11 babies on board Flight 52, all but one are found alive. Bob O'Brien scours the tail section for survivors and finds FAA investigators struggling to remove the aircraft's black boxes.
I grabbed the handle and just pulled the whole box out and took that out and brought that out the door and gave it to them.
Even as people are being pulled from the wreckage, the on-site investigation begins. In charge on the ground is Barry Trotter of the National Transportation Safety Board. A former airline pilot, Trotter became an investigator after losing his right arm in a motorcycle accident.
The condition of the aircraft was really astonishing to see that that much of the structure was left in the condition that it was in.
Unaware of the details of Avianca's troubled flight, investigators quickly find a valuable piece of evidence.
You could look at the engines right away and you could tell the engines were not turning. So there was no power on the engines. That was the first big clue.
Trotter and his team examine the fuel tanks and find just a few gallons of jet fuel still on board. It becomes clear why the 707's engines stopped turning, but the question of who's to blame is still to be answered. In the community of Cove Neck, New York, salvage workers begin the task of dismantling the shattered remains of Avianca Flight 52. But there's still one critical question. Who is responsible for Flight 52 running out of fuel and causing the death of 72 passengers and crew? The answer will be worth millions of dollars and affect dozens of lives. At the lab of the National Transportation Safety Board in Washington, D.C., investigators are eager to recover data locked inside the two black boxes. The most telling of these is often the flight data recorder, which records critical information, such as the plane's altitude, airspeed, and heading.
When we recovered the flight data recorder and brought it to our lab in Washington, we opened it and found that the foil wrap was not hooked up, so someone had actually intentionally taped the end of the foil so it wouldn't fly around and put it back in the airplane.
Without the crucial flight data recorder, investigators rely heavily on Flight 52's cockpit voice recorder, which is found with more than 40 minutes of voice recordings of the crew and communications between the first officer and air traffic controllers.
Yes, sir. We are clear to land. Stand by. All set for landing. Low glide slope.
And it was apparent from the voice recorder transcript and tape that the captain was not understanding the first officer's radio communications that were being made in English.
Everybody wants to blame the pilot, but he may be the last person to make a decision, and the scenario which caused him to be in that position where he makes the decision was created by several other people along the route.
The captain asked the first officer about 9 times, clarify information or repeat it, or to pass on information.
We are going to attempt again.
Advise we are in an emergency. Do you tell him?
Did he make a conscious decision to run out of fuel? No. He was sucked into a situation by the air traffic controllers where he ran out of fuel.
Glide slow!
The cockpit voice recorder reveals a crew desperate to land the 707 in near zero visibility and in extreme wind shear without the aid of an autopilot.
In this case, the captain had a difficult time maintaining the glide slope during the approach with the wind shear, didn't see the airport, and had to make a go-around. That almost doomed the airplane at that point.
The information being given to pilots en route was a wind shear up as high as 1,500 feet. But their pilots on approach were encountering wind shear as low as 300 feet. And that wasn't passed on to the Avianca pilot.
This is the wind shear.
The crew of Flight 52 is caught off guard. As they descend below 150 meters and slow down, a violent vertical wind forces them towards the ground, nearly causing the plane to crash less than 4 kilometers short of the runway. Ironically, Avianca 52's lack of fuel resulted in no fire or explosion, saving the survivors from almost certain death.
If the flight would have found some level ground, it was conceivable he would have slapped the fuselage down and slid to a stop. With no fuel, there would have been no fire. And I think it's very possible that most of the people would have survived it in that case.
As the hearings into the crash begin, lawyer George Tompkins is confronted by controllers who maintain that the Avianca crew failed to use the word emergency, instead using the word priority to communicate their situation.
The government took the position that the pilot never declared an emergency, so no one knew that he had a problem. But saying you're getting low on fuel and saying you cannot make your alternate, the word emergency is not necessary to say.
Negative, sir. We are running out of fuel. We just lost 2 engines and we need priority, please.
And they thought they were telling them when they said we need priority.
Para nosotros en español la palabra prioridad significa.
In Spanish, for us the word priority means first.
Corre a mí, te estoy necesitando.
Attend to me, run to me. I need you right now.
No sé si es que
I don't know if priority in other languages means that you can wait.
Significa que puedes esperar.
Avianca 052 only has 5 more minutes in the hold.
You gonna be able to take him, or I'll set him up to his alternate?
What is his speed now? I'm not sure, to be quite honest with you. Holding speed.
The NTSB concludes that air traffic's handling of Avianca 52 was proper, considering the information they were getting from the flight crew. Many of the passengers are shocked and outraged by what they feel is a gross injustice, that air traffic control is found blameless. Avianca sues the Federal Aviation Administration, which employs the air traffic controllers, saying they should have done more when Flight 52 told them they were running out of fuel. The FAA settles and ends up paying around 40% of the estimated $200 million compensation due to the victims.
If you listen and read the tapes, the transcripts of the tapes of each air route traffic control center along the route, and the final, the New York Tracon, New York Tower, Kennedy Tower, you'll find 20 places where this accident could have been avoided if somebody had done something differently.
Among the 85 survivors who escaped the shattered remains of Flight 52 are the Montoya's 2 daughters. Daniela, the baby covered in blood, is now a healthy teenager preparing for college.
The day just before the flight, we took a long trip to visit the Virgin Mary. This is a very important sanctuary in Medellin. Perhaps it was a miracle of God and the Virgin that the 4 of us survived. It was a miracle, and we feel blessed by that.
For many of the survivors, recovering from their injuries has been easier than coming to terms with the reason why Flight 52 ran out of fuel.
I had to learn to walk from scratch. It's difficult enough to deal with the injuries, it makes me very angry to think that a plane went down with 161 souls and had almost half the people lost their lives because of a word.